Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today in Finland with Frozen Trigger, taking a look at some Finnish sniper rifles. And today we have the TKIV-85, or TKIV-85. Tak is a shortening of the word sniper in Finnish. KIV is kivari, which is rifle. So the background here is that by the 1980s, the Finnish military really needed something for a formal sniper rifle. Sniper programs in Finnish armed services have always been a little bit sketchy and underfunded and not really serious. There was a demand for them during the Continuation War and the Winter War, and they developed a bunch of different systems. The best of them being the Mosin Nagant M39/44 or /43, which stayed in service into the 1970s. By that point, they'd introduced a couple other rifles, the 2766 and the 2876, but those are really more suited for international competition shooting, formal competition shooting, than they were for military sniper service. And they were kind of designed to be both of, we, the Army, don't really have the funding to create a whole sniper program, but if we can combine a couple things together, like formal competition shooting, we'll do that. So those rifles existed. The 2876s actually got imported in relatively large numbers into the United States a number of years ago, so those are available on the US market. But the Finnish government needed something that was more military appropriate in the 1980s. So they start looking for options, and they end up with two. One of them is a brand new ground-up rifle in 7.62 NATO, developed and produced by Valmet, and that would be the Valmet Model 86. That guy. It's a great rifle. The problem is, it also costs money. It's a brand new production rifle that has to be paid for. The alternative was to take existing Mosin Nagant actions that Finland had acquired back in the 1920s, essentially, and just update and rebuild them and sort of redesign the whole system to serve as an ad hoc, free-floated sniper rifle. The advantage there, it's not as good of a system. It's still in 7.62x54. It's still fundamentally a Mosin Nagant action, but it's really cheap because all of the actions and the magazines are already in stock. Like, they were paid for 50 plus years ago. So that's what the Finnish Army goes for, which shouldn't be surprising to anyone who's followed a lot of Finnish Army procurement decisions. It's not a super wealthy country. They don't have a lot of money to just blow on fanciful new gear. So the Mosin Nagant becomes the thing once again. Now this is a substantial departure from your traditional typical M91 bolt action. It's all based around this sort of bedding mounting block. So let's dig in this a little closer. Let me show you how this is actually put together. If you're curious, perhaps, about some of the Finnish Mosin Nagant snipers that predated the TKIV-85, well, I have essentially all of them in my upcoming new book, Forged in Snow, Finnish Small Arms 1917 through 2025, currently in a very exciting, fun pre-sale campaign over on Kickstarter.com. I have a link to it in the description text below. You should check it out. The book covers not just Finnish sniper rifles, but everything from handguns to light machine guns, including all of the Finnish Mosins, so check it out. There's not a whole lot left on this that really screams Mosin Nagant visually, but if we zoom in here on the action, you'll definitely see it. That is the classic Mosin Nagant bolt, albeit modified in a couple of different places. The scope mount here is clearly derived from the earlier Mosin M39-43 scope mount, so to take this off, I unscrew the thumb wheel there, and then this lever gives me, well, leverage to pull the scope back out of its dovetail mount right there. With that off, we get a nice good view of the markings up here on top. So manufacturer of at least the metal components was Valmet. Serial number here, these all start with an 85 prefix, and the marking on top is 7.62x53R D166. So 53R it's the same cartridge as 7.62x54R. It just is generally referred to as 53R in Finland. D166 is the specific bullet design that the barrel is chambered for. So it'll fire all standard 7.62 by 54 rimmed ammunition, but for best accuracy, you want to use the bullet that has the exact right ogive shape that will match up with the lands and grooves and the chamber depth here in this barrel. So that's the standard Army precision ammunition. And then the formal designation is 7.62 KIV-85. KIV is short for rifle. And we have a Finnish military tower logo there. The serial number is on the scope mount as well as the bedding block. In fact, let's take a look at how this is actually assembled. The 85 is a massive pain to take apart, so rather than strip this one down, I have a stock assembly here that I can show you that gives you a really good idea of what's going on inside. So fundamentally, this is all built around this octagonal block, and this was actually designed by a border guards engineer by the name of Toro. This slides over the barrel, and the two major screws that connect this block to the stock in this bedded base there, well, that replaces the two main receiver screws in the Mosin Nagant. So you've got the screw back here, and you've got one up front in the front of the magazine, which on this guy be under the rail here. Using those two screws to hold the receiver to the stock limits the potential accuracy of a Mosin Nagant platform because it's just not that repeatable and precise. What you really want to do is bed the whole thing into a block here, free float the barrel, and not worry about the receiver impacting accuracy. And so that's what they did with the 85, these two being the main mounting screws. Now you still have to have the other two screws in the Mosin receiver because they hold on the magazine and trigger guard, and this continues to use the same standard magazine as every other Mosin Nagant. The trigger is slightly different. The trigger is a Valmet adjustable modular trigger unit that they put into these, which is really quite nice. Much more advanced than the original standard Mosin trigger. And then we can take the bolt out. You can see the stock has this asymmetric cutout here so that you can, there we go, slide out the bolt. The safety has been essentially trimmed off because it's not effectively usable in there. The bolt handle has been replaced by this dovetailed in bolt handle. That's a carryover from designs that go as far back as the M3957. Big plastic bolt knob on there, and it is serialized on the bolt stem to match the rest of the gun. The bolt head is the same as a standard, it is a standard Mosin bolt head. Just as an interesting aside, recently, not long before this video was posted, the Finnish army had a bit of a scare with one of these. They were temporarily blocked from service use because a guy managed to blow himself up with one. Turns out he, for some reason, reassembled the rifle without the bolt head in place at all, and then chambered around and fired it, which meant there was absolutely nothing supporting the bolt, and the cartridge predictably exploded in his face. And there was a bit of an investigation on the part of the army trying to figure out, did something break? What happened? They eventually discovered, no, he just assembled the gun without the bolt head, which is incredibly dumb. So the rifles aren't actually unsafe, but there was a bit of an incident with them because of that. One other interesting modification here is the back end of the Mosin receiver was actually trimmed down just slightly to, I suppose, better fit in the stock. So this is an original Mosin receiver. You can see it's a bit longer than that guy. The scope on the TKIV-85 is actually essentially the same scope that was used on the 2876 rifles. So they are made by Schmidt & Benner 4x36. This is the standard military one with the Finnish military tower and a serial number there. And it has a BDC cam that goes out to 800 meters on the top, and it has a windage adjustment cam on the right. Now there is a variation on this. The RVL stands for Finnish Coast Guard in place of the military tower. Otherwise, the exact same scope. The Coast Guard used these rifles as well as the Army. And it's worth pointing out that there is only a minor change. Well, these are fundamentally the same scopes as on the earlier 2876 rifles. The difference is that these guys, on the TKIV-85, The windage adjustment knob is on the right, where on the earlier pattern, it was on the left. Little subtle difference in the caps on top of the turrets as well. But this was the earlier version for the 76 pattern rifles made by MSW Wetzlar, and with an adjustment on the left instead of on the right. Updated because it apparently is more convenient for a right-handed shooter to adjust the elevation or the windage knob on the right. Now, the very first production batch of TKIV-85s was, well, a pre-production batch for some trials, and it has a few differences with the final versions. So the most obvious difference is this tube in the fore end of the stock. This has a threaded cap, and it was used to store cleaning tools. So not a cleaning rod, but it would have had a wrench for disassembling the rifle, as well as a cloth for the scope and other cleaning tools that get stored under there. The pre-production guns also had this enormous bipod on them. This is basically, I'm pretty sure, modeled after one of FN's bipods, although these are not FN bipods. They are manufactured in Finland for these rifles specifically, but spring-loaded. They've got a pair of little clips there that lock into the accessory rail. This rail and the rail segments on the side are for competition equipment, slings, like front hand supports that are used in competition shooting. And this is a standardized rail for that sort of accessory. And then lastly, the adjustment spacers for the stock and the cheek piece were made in plastic on the pre-production guns, and then actually made out of wood laminate on the standard model. For comparison, here's the bipod on the standard production gun. It still locks into that bottom rail in the same way, but it is a much smaller, lighter, handier bipod. I can unscrew that and just slide it completely out of its rail. So there you go. That's the actual production version of the bipod. So as an example, one of the other things that could be mounted into these accessory rails is a biathlon style of sling like this. This has a big padded section here, and it's got this little clip up on front that sets into the rail, slides up, and locks in place. And then both of the straps would come down and attach to the sling swivel down here, giving you a pair of backpack straps for carrying the rifle while on skis, biathlon style. Note that the bolt handle's on the opposite side, so it doesn't hit you in the back. That's a cool accessory that's very indicative of this rifle's dual purpose intention as both military and competition rifle. And then of course you have the normal standard sling, which is a little wider than a typical Finnish military sling to support the weight of the rifle, but it's got the same attachment up there, and then just a plain clip to go in down at that end. One last accessory to show you here. This is the scope mount case. This is also the same scope mount case as for the 2766 and the 2876. You've got a loop to hold it on the belt there, 3 straps for closure, and then the lid has 2 support beams there. We've got a little packet with a couple of the other tools here. Not really tools, but supplies. You've got a cloth and a brush for cleaning the lens. And then the only real feature here is this piece of soft leather, which lines up with the removal lever on the scope. So that's how the scope would be transported when not actually on the gun. So production of the guns was sort of a 2-part affair. All of the metal parts were manufactured by Valmet. They were then delivered to Asevarikko 1. That's AV1. It's one of the main Finnish military small arms depots where they do maintenance and assembly of new firearms. AV1 produced the wood parts, the stocks, and then assembled those with all of the metal components and did all the fitting and finishing, delivering completed rifles to the Finnish army. So the first 30 prototypes, which you saw a moment ago with the bipods and the tubes under the stock, those are delivered in 1983. They do some trials. Those are okay. Main production begins in 1984, August of 84, and all of the rifles are delivered in 1985, or by the end of 1985. Unfortunately, I don't have any numbers on exactly how many were delivered, but this would replace a lot of those older, well, frankly, World War II era Mosin snipers in official Finnish military service. They still were a dual function gun. There were actually two different versions of this that were manufactured. This is the military pattern. It has a heavier barrel and it's set up exclusively to use optical sights. But there was also a competition version that had a slightly lighter barrel in order to meet the then standard maximum allowable weight for competition of 5.5 kilos, or about 12.1 pounds. They've got the weight down by reducing the barrel weight. And those are also set up to use diopter iron sights, again, to meet competition rules. So you end up with a rifle that can fulfill both purposes. But there was at least a little bit more of an emphasis on military use of these rifles in this pattern. Ultimately, these remain in service until just about the present day. Their replacement is the TKIV-85, which is the new .308 caliber AR-10 pattern rifle being manufactured by Sako. Deliveries of those have started to the Finnish army, and they are replacing these in service, finally taking the last Mosin Nagant actions out of actual frontline military service with the Finnish army. Finally, about 100 years after they were first put into service. It's unclear exactly what will happen to these. It's unlikely that they will be sold onto the civilian market. There are some current regulations on markings and disbursement of stuff and proofing and deactivation that make it unlikely these will come out. Frankly, there's also probably a really good chance that any that are in good serviceable condition will be sent to Ukraine instead of sold on the commercial market. So it's sad that the collectors worldwide, Finland and the US and elsewhere, probably won't have access to these, but that's often just how it goes. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. These are very difficult to find even in Finland. So thanks for watching.